Because truly living your values, truly living authentically is not having a double life. And you're going to slip. There's going to be times when old habits kind of come out and it's all just feedback. But if your new identity, if you shed this old identity and you do the work of shining the light on the darkness, it no longer has control over you. So if nothing else, I hope you take that. You can't live a double life. You can't have secrets and be able to really serve others as a creator. You just can't. And I'm living proof that doing this work actually will not hinder you from your work, but actually enable you to do the best work of your life and find your purpose.
Hello, and welcome to The Art of Lost and Found, a podcast that explores the creative relationship between our inner and outer worlds. It's a creative exploration through stories, insights, resources, and tools to help you intentionally design your life and work. I'm your host, Brooke Eston, also known as the Creative Amplifier. I'm part strategist, part designer, part coach, and part artist. And I'm dedicated to helping fellow creatives bridge the gaps between those big dreams and practical realities. Now let's get into it. Today on the podcast, we have an incredibly special guest. His name is Ian Koniak, and he is known by many as the master of sales. Ian has been a top performer at some of the largest companies in the world. He was number one at Salesforce and holds the record to this day. This is somebody who has experience selling over $100 million. This is no joke. Ian shares with us about his humble beginnings and his deep, deep journey into self-discovery through chaos, through hedonism, through international travel, through relationships, and through the belly of multiple addictions. Ambitious and self-driven since the early days of his career, Ian made the fatal mistake of placing his sense of self and his sense of worthiness in the external. This is a familiar struggle for so many of us, and Ian demonstrates an extreme example. Having gone deep into addictions around drugs, alcohol, sex, gambling, anything that you could possibly imagine, Ian has had to wrestle with. But against all odds, he recovered. He is actively in recovery, supporting himself through his habits, through his relationships, through his continual investment in his own personal growth. And he's also a pillar to many in his community. He is one of the highest energy, most ambitious, and most generous people I have ever had the pleasure of working with. Untap Your Sales Potential, his signature program, has been wildly successful. But even though Ian is an expert in sales, really, he's an expert in how to navigate the difficulties that life presents. Having wrestled his own demons and gone through many dark nights of the soul, Ian is grounded in who he is now. He has his faith, he has his family, he has his deep, deep commitment to self-care and personal growth. And he has one of the most incredible stories of transformation I have ever heard. Join us in this episode as we explore both the internal and external journey of going to hell and back. Ian is an inspiration for many, myself included, and I am so thrilled and privileged to welcome him to the podcast today. Hello, Ian Koniak. Welcome to the Art of Lost and Found podcast.
Hi, Brooke. It's great to see you, even though we see each other every single week. This is different. I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, lucky me. So I wanted to start off just diving into your life. I feel like so many podcasts that you've been on talk about your professional career first, and you bring in your personal story and your own story of transformation and how that
Yeah.
was a driver through your career trajectory. But as somebody who has achieved an incredible amount of external success, I am so much more interested in the inner journey to get there and the journey that you have to experience every day, regardless of having, quote unquote, made it in terms of external perspective. So let's start off first, going back to the days of little baby Ian, back in his innocence before anything got too crazy. I wanted to ask you first, tell me a little bit about your upbringing and the context in which you grew up.
Gosh, where do I start? So there's a lot, I guess. If you want to start itty bitty baby, I can start it when I was 2 years old, when my parents separated. So my mother, talk about resilience. It's a lot I get from my mother. She divorced my father, and it was a messy, bad breakup, and she didn't want to be anywhere around him. So she took me and my brother from New York to California,
Oh, wow.
and actually didn't tell him. So my upbringing, I guess, started with being raised by a single mom. She really was a really hard worker. My mom, she's now retired, but she started as a nurse and then got her doctorate, then went to go work at UCLA as an associate professor, became a professor, and eventually the associate dean of UCLA School of Nursing. And so I had her and my stepfather kind of as my primary, I guess, examples growing up.
Yeah.
And my mom, because of her background, was always really, really hard on education. And she was very strict about me getting an education. And those are kind of the values that I was raised with. But I genuinely hated school. I did not want to be there. I did not enjoy it. I loved socializing, and I was a very, I would say, kind of like a partier, I guess, from the time I was, really started high school up until, middle school, elementary. You're kind of like, really not, you don't have as much freedom to kind of do what you want or what. So I was kind of kept under the strict guise of my mom. And this other part of me, I would say my mom was like very academic and very, rigid, and just the way that she worked, and she wasn't around that much. She was a great provider, but she was a really hard worker. So I don't think she was emotionally as present, with me, because she was trying to get by and doing her best. And she modeled some great things for me in terms of work ethic and providing for her family. But there was this other part of me, I would say, that that was in conflict. It was a rebel growing up. And I genuinely, I guess everything was fine until I'd say 6th grade. Okay. When I started middle school, I was about 12 years old, and shit kind of hit the fan. And my father was an addict. He suffered from depression and addiction. He was an alcoholic. He fortunately, before he passed away when I was only 20, but before he did, he got sober and he made a lot of changes. But by then it was too late. His lifestyle had caught up with him, and he passed away. But I never saw any of that growing up. I wasn't exposed to it because I was raised with my mom and my stepdad. And so I share this because when I was 12 years old, those addictive parts of me started to really come out. And they were like, not what I saw from my mom and my stepdad, who were in academia. My stepdad was an engineer. My mom was a professor. They were very strict, didn't drink, didn't smoke, didn't party or anything like that. Yet when I was 12, they separated. My mom separated from my stepdad, and my older brother, who was with us, went to go live with my father. And so we quickly became a family of 4 to a family of 2.
Yeah.
And now my mom had to really, again, she was dealing with a divorce. She was trying to raise me, or separation. She was dealing with her own depression. And I was kind of turned into this, I would say, more of a latchkey kid at that time. A latchkey kid means like you're given the key to your house, right? But no one's there. So I was on my own in the mornings because she had to go to work, and after school. And that's when I started, I think, rebelling, because I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be seen. My dad was in New York. My mom was gone. And again, it's easy to kind of look back, but I started stealing. I didn't get into drugs and alcohol and sex and some of the stuff that I did later on in high school, but I started stealing. I started lighting fires. I started vandalizing, breaking windows. I was definitely acting out in an early age. And that kind of like was always kind of set this bar for like me as a person who was in conflict with myself. A person who here was being raised by my mom, get good grades, follow this path, and yet this other rebel side of me just says, fuck it, that you want to do what I want when I want, screw the world. Until like 2020, from the early childhood in 6th grade to 2020, I always had these two parts of me. One was this achievement part, and one was this like crazy, wild, rebel, kind of self-sabotaging part. And they were very much in conflict. What the world wants, what my parents want, what's good, and then what my desire to kind of break free of all of this. So I hope that helps paint the picture a little bit, because it's all part of like how I became who I am now.
Of course. So I'm curious, when you're that age and you have that much energy that needs to be expressed, because you're one of the highest energy people I've ever met. Like, I can absolutely see how important that is to intentionally choose where you want to channel that. When you were younger, did you have a sense of what you wanted to do or what you wanted to be, or like any sense, or you were just in the rebellion?
I wanted to be popular. I wanted to be seen. That was all I cared about, honestly. And it all kind of translates to my addiction, right? So I discovered, okay, so my 12 years old, my parents break up. We go from a family of 4 to family 2, and I have a pet who I was like so close to. She was a pet bird. And this bird, Lucy was her name. She was my best friend. And she was like comforting during this time.
Of course.
Well, a tragedy happened with Lucy. Okay. And we had a cat. And so one day I was, let the bird out of the cage, and I didn't realize it, but the door was open. And I saw the cat kind of start to come running in at the same time the bird was flying. And I'm like, oh, I got to close the door. And I slammed the door. Well, I slammed it right as the bird's neck had gotten into the crack. And I watched this bird collapse and squawk and spin literal circles with the broken neck and die right in front of me. And I couldn't do anything about it. I literally ran out the door because I didn't have, no one was home because I was a latchkey kid. And I ran to the door next door and I said, help me, my bird. I went back, the bird was dead. And it was like this additional loss.
Yeah.
My stepdad, my brother, now my bird, it's just me and my mom. So at that point, it was like, I discovered porn exactly the same time. 12 years old. I discovered porn. I found a video in my mom's house, in her drawer, snooping around. And I started to kind of from an early standpoint, use sex or fantasy as a way to feel better, to cope. And then that kind of like evolved over the years, as working with me into a sex addiction, which also was alcohol and drugs and other things. It all kind of like was fueled together. All I knew is I had to get good grades. And when I wasn't studying, I just wanted to feel good. And I felt good from recognition from others, from external validation, from fantasy, from parties, from numbing myself. And that really, again, it really started back and I didn't realize any of this until I went to therapy, and I went back and like looked at my childhood and like how I got to this point. And thank God for my therapist for having the tools she did. But that was the last thing on my mind, is what I wanted to be when I grew up. All I cared about was like, I wasn't thinking that far ahead. And I did have ADHD as well, which makes it focusing on the future is not something people with ADHD generally do. It's like, what do I do right now in this moment? And all the while I'm trying to put on this image to my mom, who's a professor, like I'm a great student. I remember like coming home late at night, sometimes 2 a.m. My mom would come down, and look at my eyes, your eyes are red. Are you okay? And I stoned out of my head. I'm like, I'm fine. And I just got really good at like covering stuff up.
Yeah.
So that was like the start of, I guess, what you would say would be a double life.
Yeah, that's where I want to take this, because I think as a theme of this podcast, because I mostly speak with creatives, entrepreneurs, people who are in some type of process of making something, a lot of them speak about a feeling of double life, like the person who they think they're supposed to be and the person who they really are. Sometimes that's the artist conflict, right? The imposter syndrome, all of that. Other times it comes in the form of self-sabotage, of how do I present to the world so that, I don't get unwanted attention, but then I'm deeply tormented and that needs to be expressed in some way. So you feel like, well, can you share a little bit about how this double life started to be more of a present theme for you?
I was blessed. I'll just say blessed with intelligence.
Yeah.
That's one thing that my father was a dentist. My mom was a professor, and I just got good genes. Things came easy to me. So in high school, I ended up getting like a 4.1 GPA, even partying my head off dealing with addiction. I still was able to get by. So it's like the theme was really, I can get away with it. Yeah. I can get away with it. Right. Mm-hmm. And I get into college, I go to Berkeley, which is one of the top schools in the US. And I was living a real double life there in terms of my college activities and in I was taking everything under the sun, right? And partying my heads off and really, again, let's just say I could have been arrested. I could have, and I had so many skirts with like the law and somehow always talked my way out of it or got out of it, and just like kept getting lucky.
Yeah.
And, I don't know. I always get afraid like my parents will listen to this or someone will hear it. But let's just say I was in the pharmaceutical sales industry.
I was going to say, is that where your sales career started?
My sales career started in college. And I was good at it. In that space where people in my business, we'll call it, got caught. Mm-hmm. Both above and below me.
Yeah.
And that was for me, like, I was smart enough to say, this is wrong. It's only a matter of time. And I got out. I got out with saving, a decent amount of money. And then my father passes away. Mm. It's November of 1999. Yeah. At this point, I'm 20 years old. Mm-hmm. Okay. And basically, I'm like, all this stuff is happening. I need to get the fuck out of here. And I take off and I go to Australia. And I live there for a year. Now, I did it under the double life of education abroad program. So I was still technically in college. But at that point, I discovered this new part of me. This is where my true essence started to shine. Okay. I discovered the traveler, the adventurer. So rather than doing drugs and partying and stuff like that, I fell in love with nature. I fell in love with hiking and mountaineering, and I climbed Ayers Rock, and I went to Tasmania and spent 2 weeks out hiking in the middle of nowhere by myself with snakes. And I had this like wild lust and love for nature. And that's where I really found God. I found this greater purpose. Now, I didn't stop drinking and I didn't stop gambling. So I get to this area of my life. And now that I'm by myself in Australia, I'm away from the pharmaceutical sales industry, but I'm still a consumer of alcohol. And I became this, I'm going to get drunk and start gambling money. And there's women here. And it just became this like crazy part of me.
Yeah. So it's at this time, what's going on for you psychologically?
I was miserable. I was just repeating this pattern of hookup. I remember how to log and I keep track of all the women I hooked up with. And it's like, anyway, I hit another catalyst 6 months into my journey in Australia, and I catch mononucleosis.
Oh no.
And I'm like, I got to get out of Australia. And I go back to my parents and I recover and I heal for like 3 or 4 weeks. Okay. And that was kind of like the first turning point.
What did that recovery look like?
Me being in bed and just resting. I had realized that what this path of how I was living my life up to that point was destructive.
Yeah.
And it was miserable, and it culminated in me feeling so sick I had to fly back across the world and just recover. And my mom, bless her soul, again, she didn't know any of this. On paper, I was this straight A student. On paper, I was this, Berkeley kid who was getting great grades still.
So when you're recovering there, your mom thinks it's just the mono.
Yeah, it's just the mono.
Okay.
She doesn't know any of this stuff. And something happened on that trip when I came back to Australia. Everything was different. I moved from the place I was, and I just felt for the first time like I stopped like getting drunk every weekend. I stopped like going, to the casino as much. I started traveling.
What was it? What was it about? Because there's so many things that you could have gravitated towards. Like, what was it about traveling that hit that spot and could absorb that energy?
It wasn't the kind of traveling like you think, like you have a nice hotel and you go to different places. I was doing adventure travel. So I think that addictive part of me, that part that wanted that variation, was definitely being exploited. I have this trip. I'm going to be an English teacher in Venezuela. I got my visa all worked out. It was a program at Berkeley where they send you abroad. It's an externship. Venezuela did not have drugs and really not a lot of alcohol. I was an English teacher, so I was sober the entire year I was there. I fell in love with photojournalism and traveling. So every weekend I would go to different national parks and take pictures, and I fell in love with somebody in Venezuela. So that was like one of the best years of my life, because I was living this pure, happy, traveling and in love and just teaching and giving back, and it all come full circle now as I teach and coach people for a living now. But the truth is that year was like me in my purest form. I was journaling every day. I was working out. I climbed the highest mountain in Venezuela, 16,000 feet. I was in this like operating from this place of pure adventure and love. I was 22 years old, and all that stuff that I had done in college up to that point was behind me. I finally felt like my true self, like my true essence.
Tell me a little bit more about that, because being sober for a year and doing all of this physical work and like doubling down, like that's such an extreme from the year that you had before. What was going on in your mind? Like, how were you understanding?
I found purpose. That's what it was. I think if you're going to the external, it's because you lack clarity and vision and internal purpose. That's usually the reason why you go to drugs or alcohol or sex or external validation, because you don't know who you are. It was like this clarity of like, I know who I am and I'm following. I was in tune with the universe and the world, with God. I was so connected when I was with people. Again, I was in love. It was like, I want to be with this woman, and I'm like present with her and having a great time with her. And when I wasn't, my purpose was traveling, but I wasn't just traveling to have fun. I was traveling to national parks. I was traveling to holy places that were very, very deep in terms of my soul, and journaling when I was there.
They were spiritual experiences.
Oh, very much so. And then I would take a lot of pictures, and I would scan the pictures, and I would email out to like a newsletter that I had back home of friends and family. So I was like not only doing it for myself, but I was doing it to like build this portfolio. I wanted to be a photographer. I wanted to be a writer. The purpose was like all the growth it wasn't just the adventure and the photography. I was also learning the language, integrating, which I know you know all about. And then also the love was a purpose too. And so that, again, I know this is a transformation, but my visa ran out and all of that got overnight squashed. And then I go back to this other person after my visa ran out. I used all my funds. I had $0 to my name. Okay. So me and my ex-girlfriend talked about it. I just need to figure it out. I'm going to be a photojournalist. I'm going to make money. I'm going to bring it to the US. Give me a year. And so I went from like this amazing freedom and living this full life to now no money, no job, no girlfriend, and moving back with my parents, starting from scratch at 23. And that changed the course of everything from that point forward.
I'm curious, having had these really high highs and these spiritual experiences, how that was lost and how the like tsunami of hedonism came back into your life and just engulfed you again.
Okay, so I get back, and here's what happened. I started submitting all my portfolio work to National Geographic and Discovery, and I'm so bullish on how great I am. And they just basically drop it on me that they don't have staff positions. Everyone who works with them is a contractor, these photographers, and they submit it and they basically buy the different photos. So I was like devastated. And I'm like, you won't take me as a staff because I couldn't make the money that I needed to get my ex-girlfriend there. Once I learned the reality of what being a photographer or writer entailed, I compared that to my other goal of being with my girlfriend. Blanca was her name. And I'm like, you know what? This is more important to me, to make money and to save money to get her to come to the US. I said, well, what can I do? I said, well, I'm going to go into sales. Sales is a job where I can make as much money as my performance will let me, right? There's no income cap. So I'm like, I can do this. I'm super hungry. I'm motivated. And I go to a sales career fair. There was a flyer, and the flyer at this career fair said, first year, 50,000, second year, 75,000, third year, 100,000 plus guaranteed. I'm like, okay, what do I got to do? What do I got to do? And she's like, you just need to do what we tell you to do. I'm like, I can do that. And basically that's how I got my start into sales. And so what they told me I needed to do was to do 2 appointments and to set 2 appointments every day. And that sounds easy, but it's not. I was going door to door in Koreatown selling photocopiers. And that was the job. It was selling copiers and printers. But I was very good at it. I was very determined. And I honestly didn't have a choice. I learned, I mentored, I worked my tail off. And by January of 2004, I had her in the US, and I had saved enough money to put her through college. So I brought her to the US on a student visa. And I went from like living with my parents now to supporting somebody from another country, paying for college and having this immense amount of pressure. I will say during that year of like just putting my blinders on, I was giving myself so much stress, and it was so hard that I went back to the old drinking and blacking out and strip clubs and sex. This is where the double life came back. This part of me now I'm like in this hot relationship where it's like steamy and crazy. And it was a toxic relationship. Because of the pressure on both of us, for her to be away from her family and solely dependent on me, and for me to be providing, it just really put a lot of pressure on both of us. And we were both really young and immature. And so I kind of kept this partying going, work hard, party hard. But now I have this person I'm supporting, and she sees this side of me. And it's like, I was not a good boyfriend, and she was not a good girl. We just were not good with each other. And that culminated in a year and a half into this relationship, she cheated on me. So basically, I kicked her out of the house, and now I had nothing. I had no purpose anymore. I had no purpose. My purpose in working hard was to provide for her, to put her through college, to keep it there. But once she was gone, my addiction just spiraled out of control, where it nearly killed me.
The reason you got into it in the first place, those types of behaviors, were to feel good. That was probably the worst that you had ever felt.
100%. It was the worst. I was so depressed, and I went to sex and I went to alcohol. Again, themes of trying to, have women get attention from women to feel better, which started from my 12-year-old, boy who saw that fantasy and saw that as the norm. So again, sex became this way I viewed myself as successful, sex and money and external validation. And so the years from when she cheated to when, really until I met my wife, were marked by, it was about 5 years of deep addiction. This companionship for women, or needing to be seen by women to feel worthy, and needing to make a lot of money to feel worthy. That was like my new purpose. It was like, I want to impress, or I want to feel like I'm worthy. So I started performing really well at work. I threw myself into it, but it was not for the right reasons. It was definitely so I can prove to others and to the world that I was worthy.
So what happened when you got there? Like when you were making the big money, when you were getting all that attention, when the world was seeing you as hyper successful, what was going on with you? And then what happened that there was a shift?
So 2007, 2008, that period, I got promoted. I killed it at Rico. I was making north of like 300,000. Then I get promoted. Then I get promoted again. Then I get promoted again. So now I'm supervising 80 people.
Wow.
And I have 80 employees under me and 10 managers. And I'm literally bringing them with me. And I'm setting this energy of work hard, play hard. And I was part of the problem because I didn't do the work on myself at that point. So I was perpetuating this toxic sales culture. Think of like Wolf of Wall Street, or think of the bad behaving salespeople. That was like the purpose. The purpose became I work hard and therefore I play hard, and I'm going to go on these benders of like, this is why I live. This is what I live for. Yeah, Vegas trip, this trip, that trip. So it was like this fucking emptiness of like a cycle of work hard, piss it away, feel shitty on Sunday, go back to work, do the same thing. And I think a lot of people in sales and on Wall Street and on these high pressure, high income jobs, men especially, deal with this. And that was a cycle I was in until I met my wife in 2010. So my wife, I met her at a Tony Robbins event. So she was my fire walking partner. I meet my wife and she's amazing. And she's like everything that I dreamed of and more. And I'm like, she is going to be the catalyst for me changing. I was in therapy at this point. I'm like, I can change for her. Right. So now the double life begins again. This is who I am. I work hard. I play hard. Let's go. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't hiding. I was just partying. But then with her, she was Christian and she was actually Jehovah's Witness. And so she came to the table with a different set of values than me. And she was just this kind, loving person. It was like she had been sheltered her whole life or something. Like, who is this? She's beautiful and she's humble and she's nice. Like, what is going on? Yeah. And it just made me want to change. It really did. So then I start the double life again. I start putting my best face on for her. And then I actually am continuing, albeit much less so, but still continuing at times to do things that are out of integrity with my values and my marriage for 10 years since the time I met her until I got into recovery. I kind of had this double life that was happening where when I traveled or when I went away, I still had this desire to escape, and alcohol and sex became, the means in which I would do that. And I wasn't doing hard drugs, and I certainly wasn't living the lifestyle that I did in college or even afterwards, but I still had this part of me that was coming out. And I remember I would be thinking every time, I said, why do I do these things? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? It's like two-faced. And how do you live with yourself if you're keeping secrets? How do you live with yourself if you can't present all of yourself? Like the meaning of intimacy is into me you see, meaning you see everything. There are no secrets. And if you're in a marriage, you have to know everything about your partner. And I still was presenting this, this positive side without acknowledging the darkness. And my wife this past weekend told me, I love you so much. I feel so close to you. I know everything about you. And it was just beautiful. It's like she knows me and there's nothing to hide. And when you shine a light on
that, you felt seen. I mean, because that was the original wound, right? Of like, look at me, see me, pay attention to me, value me. So to have her reflect back to you, like, I know all of it, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I love you.
100% in recovery, in religion, everything is contingent upon confession, right? In recovery, you have to confess as part of step 4. You have to take an inventory, and then you have to go through in step 10 and share how you've wronged or hurt people, right? It is the foundation. And when I went into recovery for sex addiction, part of my recovery was to do a full disclosure to my wife of everything I'd ever done that was out of integrity in secret. It was the most painful, difficult thing I've ever had to go through because I knew that there was a possibility that she would leave me. And she was pregnant, and she, she did leave me briefly. She did for about a week. And, we didn't know it was going to happen, but she came back. That was like the hardest time of my life. But part of this recovery was a confession and going through. And I literally wrote everything I'd ever done. Took me a month or two to go back and get all the information straight because it had happened over a 10-year period, but went through all my credit card statements, went through all my travel receipts, and then went back and basically told her everything, and then took a polygraph test right after and confessed And it was like the hardest thing I've ever done but it was the first time, it felt like the first time in my life, that I was carrying all the secrets and burden and pain, and I just let it all out in truth. It was the first time in my life I'd truly been honest with who I was and faced, what I had done. And it was like that. I've never looked back since that period. It's been ever since that 3 years ago now, it's been nothing but blessings and abundance and truth. And, it's allowed me to really step into my mission and my vision now and work and live and show up and serve from a place of authenticity and love, where I can talk freely about this because it's not who I am. I don't have this double life. I don't have these conflicts anymore that are basically preventing me from flying and doing my best work.
Yeah. Do you think at this point, now that you've had that release and that clarity and you can fully step into it, do you think that was something that was part of what empowered you to be able to do what you're doing now?
Oh, 100%. It's not even a question. God's wanted me to use what's happened to me to help other people for my whole life, to help people, inspire people that they can change, that they can live a life of honesty and integrity and be faithful. And, that was part of my story. So in 2019, when I was doing all this, I felt called. I didn't feel called to tell her everything and like throw up on her and all the things I had been doing, but I felt called to start opening up about who I was. And that calling came from God. There's no ifs or buts about it. I felt a deep calling. I need to come clean with my wife. And so I kind of started with things that I felt like were more innocuous or harmless, and started kind of confessing there. I was looking at porn, and the porn I'm looking at, is interactive. And I told my wife, because I thought it was like, in my twisted denial brain, I thought that wasn't cheating. Yeah. Well, she ends up finding my credit card statements, seeing that I had gone and paid for these, these these webcam things, and she lost it. She genuinely just collapsed. She collapsed in the floor, and she started convulsing.
Oh, wow.
Shaking. I've never seen anything, trembling like a child. It was the saddest thing I'd ever seen. And she was pregnant.
It actually reminds me of the scene you described with the bird.
Yes.
Right? Like just drop into the ground and that, and like, what can you do?
Then it got really scary, and she started going into labor.
Oh, wow.
She was 4 months pregnant.
Oh, God.
So if you go into labor at 4 months, you lose the baby. No babies, you don't. So now it became this thing of like, oh shit, I hurt my wife. Oh shit, I murdered my son.
Yeah.
Murdered. The thing that I did caused the baby to die. Well, that was like, okay, let's get into fight or flight mode. So we took off, we got into the car, and that was my come to Jesus. That was my, I prayed. I said, God, do not take this baby. God, I will do whatever it takes to change. God, please, please don't take this baby. And we get to the doctor, he puts the ultrasound, and I'm thinking there's no heartbeat. He's like looking and like examining. I'm like, oh no. And the doctor's like, I hear a heartbeat. I'm like, oh, thank God. He's like, the baby's okay. And I'm like, oh, I'm like, what is it? What's happening? She's in labor. What's going on? He's like, these aren't labor contractions, Ian. These are stress contractions.
Oh, wow.
You cause so much stress. He's like, and he said, what do you do? What'd you do? Did you cheat? You got a girlfriend? Like, what's going on? Something like that. I'm like, well, something like that. And he's like, he sees it all the time, apparently, which is really sad. But that's the state of the world we live in, where people are unfaithful, and a lot of marriages are based on lies. And mine certainly was no exception. And I didn't think it was cheating, but the fact that I did that to her, absolutely. It's not about what you think is okay; it's what your partner thinks is okay.
Yeah, it's an agreement. That's a relationship. You have an agreement.
That's right. Yeah. It's like if everything's above board, go do what you want. But if you're hiding things and keeping it secret because you think it's going to hurt your partner, there's a problem. Yeah. And so that was it for me. That was it. And I started my recovery journey. I found a certified sex addiction therapist. I found SAA, which is like AA but for sex. That started my recovery, where I started for the first time in my life being real in my marriage. I confessed. I took a polygraph. I got everything on the table, and it was really rocky for a while, but now we've had a real marriage for 3 years, and it's been the best marriage we've ever I mean, it's like a new marriage. We're renewing our vows this year. It'll be 10
Oh,
years. And God bless my wife,
congratulations.
and we have two beautiful boys, and they're not going to have to inherit the addiction that I inherited from my father, and that my brother and my cousin and all my family has had this thing in our family. They really have, the men in our family. It's not been just me. And my father had it too.
At this point in your journey, it seems like you've had so many clear lessons around your actions create your future. Like you are responsible for what you're creating, whether you want to create, the debauchery and the hedonism, the hell and all of that, or if you want to create that intimacy, that strength, that commitment, that business, because now you've been able to take all that energy, which is innate to your being, and channel it into the creation of the work that we've done together.
That's right. It's where do you want to channel this? Do you want to channel it to adventure travel? Do you want to channel it into sex and drugs and rock and roll? Do you want to channel it into your work, or do you want to channel it into purpose and living your mission and fulfilling your mission on this planet?
How do you do that? Like, how do you create structure to not just slide back into what's easy and feels good in the moment?
Well, that you just said it, right? It's becoming and building the identity of somebody who does what's hard. And that's my daily mantra. I set boundaries, but my day is genuinely full with things that align to my goals in life. And the key is not to have your goals be single threaded around work. If you're just throwing it all to your business, then I'm just going to repeat what I've done before. So just today, I woke up and, I went to look at my daily devotional, and, I fell asleep snuggling my wife. I woke up and took an energy shake and wrote my goals for the day. And when this ends, I'm going to go have lunch with my wife. Every day I have lunch with my wife from 12 to 1. Then I'll work from 1 to 6 again. So I work about 9 hours a day. And when I'm working on things that matter. So that's really important. And then when I get done at 6 o'clock, I cook dinner. I spend time with my family. I put the kids to bed, and I'll watch a show with my wife. And it's like, I just really am tight with my family. And honestly, like, I also train. I'm running my second marathon in April. So like for me, it's about like family, self, and work. So I have those 3 buckets. And from the time I wake up to the time I go to sleep, everything is falling into the bucket of one of those 3. And is it perfect? No, but it ain't extreme. It's like the highs are lower and the lows are higher. So, I'll train, I'll do a meditation, or I'll look at my daily devotionals. I'll pray every day. I have my things that are my rock solid routines and habits that I can rely on to feel good. And those things are without compromise. They just get done. And so that's the key. I pivot, I move, I adapt, and I say no a ton, Brooke. Outside of my core wheelhouse of coaching and serving, I won't do it. Even selling right now is outside of my core wheelhouse of coaching and serving. So for me, it's creating content, it's coaching, it's working on my business versus in my business. So I'm hiring a salesperson to help with the sales calls. I'm hiring a community person to help with managing my 100+ clients and making a nice community experience for onboarding and for making sure people are getting value from the program. So it's like, I've had to kind of learn this, but I consider myself wise enough to know what I'm really good at is being self-aware, is where am I working well and productive, and where's my energy coming from versus what is stuff that's outside of my genius, and anything outside of it where I know, because I feel the feedback, because I feel depleted. I feel anything with accounting and operations and analysis, like that's not me. This is my genius. Talking to people, inspiring people, energized around helping people think bigger for themselves. So that's what I'm trying to do most of the time. And everything else I push off. It doesn't mean it doesn't need to get done. I just spend the time finding people to be able to do it and delegating that stuff. So it's like, I think that's part of it, is like knowing what you're good at and what lights you up versus what drains your energy. And most of the running the business stuff just is a suck for me. And I don't want to deal with it,
It's the self-awareness, but mixed with the boundaries, right? Because it's one thing to be self-aware, but if you don't have boundaries, you're going to get eaten alive.
That's how I do it, is clarity, getting crystal clear on who you are and where you want to spend your time allows you to say no to things that are outside of the core things, which I know sometimes the center of what I'm doing becomes growing the business and revenue and providing a lifestyle for my family. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. But when I'm making that the center, I don't feel fulfilled and happy. When I'm making service the center and faith the center, I feel alive. I find I'm very good at like finding the best people for what I need. And like we've worked together a long time for a reason, right?
Yeah. If you could speak to your younger self when you were in the middle of all of that, what wisdom would you impart?
It's so hard because like, honestly, I feel like where we are and what we do at that point in life is exactly where we are supposed to be and what we need to learn the lesson.
The pressure that creates
I would just say you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. It's going to work out. I know you're in pain, but it's going to be okay. I wouldn't say don't do this or don't do that, or because that, like, those years and those lessons are what enabled me to realize it's not what I wanted. But if we can trust that we're exactly where we need to be and what's happening to us is a sign that we can either use it as feedback to change and to grow, or use it as feedback to keep following it, right? I might tell myself to give more space, to listen more, and to explore who I am internally and stop just trying to fill the void. But it's hard. It's like, would I really listen to myself at that point in time, or would I think I was crazy? Because that's me at 43, having gone through so much experience. I think you just sometimes have to learn what you want by doing what you don't want and realizing it's not the way. You have to be in tune with yourself to know that you're either, on the right path or you're not. And when you're on the right path, you'll know it, because it doesn't feel so hard. It doesn't feel like such a battle. You don't have these competing parts of you that are fighting.
But you're sharing what you know. And your program, the Untap Your Sales Potential, your primary program right now, really starts with nothing related to sales. It's all about, who are you? What do you care about? What's important to you? How do you measure, your life? Like it lays this really strong foundation of building up that self before you move into the skills around the external.
It starts with mindset. It really does. It's knowing who you are, what you stand for, living your values, knowing your why. And I just didn't do that in my 20s. It was like, make a lot of money and be number one. And it's like the extrinsic. I have a great slide that I teach in my program. It's like extrinsic motivators, money, recognition, status, others' expectation, versus intrinsic, which is growth. It's the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's self-actualization. It's the intrinsic is being true to yourself, living your values, being authentic, growing, honesty. Like it's like, wanting to get better, having goals that are unique to you versus external, right? So making them your goals versus what society or everybody else tells you your goals should be. So that's like, it's interesting, because as I have seen a very, very rapid success with my business, I have a lot of people telling me, oh, go take it here, go to this, you can scale this, get 8 figures, raise money, go make it this giant thing. And it could, but is that what I want? No. Not at all. Not at all. What I want to do is serve at the highest level and have space. I don't want to be so busy running and growing this business that I forget the core reason why I started it and what I'm doing. So I stay in one-on-one coaching when everyone else tells me, you're crazy. Why are you doing one-on-one coaching? Because I find that's where I can make the biggest impact. So I keep that as part of my program, and I don't intend to take that away, because honestly, I see the lives change from those one-on-one coaching calls. So it's like, do I need to do that? Probably doesn't scale. Probably trading for time for money. Probably not the best use of my revenue generating time. But you know what? Who cares? It fills my cup. So I genuinely feel, Brooke, that, like, again, having like knowing who you are and being true to yourself and living the life, like, no one can tell you how to live your life. Okay. But you need to take the time and take the feedback. Another piece of advice I'll give people is, like, if you can't create space to figure out what you want and to rehone your vision and connect with who you are, then make the space via either coaching, right? Life coaching or spiritual coaching, like something like that, to like have that forced time that's on your calendar where you know you're going to have the space for it, or make the space via retreats. This is not something I just do on my own. I'm not good at, like, when I'm on my own making space to figure out, am I calibrating right? Do I have feedback? I'm really good at putting myself in places where I have to turn off my phone and I have to be present. So every year I'll go on retreats, and I have coaches every year. And it's like, I did therapy for a long time. Like, I force myself to prioritize that as part of my operating rhythm. So you ask me how I do it. That's part of my secret sauce is I don't necessarily, sometimes I move so fast and I have such high energy that I don't always get the feedback during the day, but I put places and spaces in my calendar for feedback. So in February, I have a 3-hour vision workshop that I blocked off just for vision. In April, I'm going on a retreat for 4 days, men's retreat in Texas.
Oh, wow.
So I hired a spiritual coach. So I have all these things that are forcing me to make sure I'm on the right path, because I don't fully trust myself that I'm just going to listen.
And I think another piece of that also is that somebody else is holding the container.
Yes.
Right? You don't have to do all of that. Like, you can just be in the experience.
Exactly. It's so true. So I again, that's how I get my creativity. I know this is like to get in touch with the creativity. Creativity for me is this. Creativity is getting to express my words and getting to create via videos, create via writing what I post. And I express that when I feel inspired. And when I'm inspired is when I know the time that I'm spending the day is on the right things that light me up. And then the creativity just flows. So it all kind of, I want to come full circle on the theme of this podcast, but that's how, when you're on the right path, like the creativity, it's just like the ideas, you can't stop thinking about it. It's constant.
This is beautiful. Thank you so much for showing up and being so authentic and present and engaged and activated and passionate about this, because
I love
this is the work. This is the work. And I just, you're so generous in the way that you give. And I feel really grateful that you chose to give some time for this podcast.
I'm happy to. This is important stuff. And I hope, if you're listening to this, and I hope it reaches a lot of people, that you can reflect upon, parts of you that might be in conflict. Because truly living your values, truly living authentically, is not having a double life. It's not having these parts. It's following and you're going to slip. There's going to be times when old habits kind of come out, and there's going to be times, and it's all just feedback. But if your new identity, if you shed this old identity and you do the work of shining the light on the darkness, it no longer has control over you. So if nothing else, I hope you take that. You can't live a double life. You can't have secrets and be able to really serve others as a creator. You just can't. The more vulnerable and the real, and the more you actually do the work of shining the light on, which is therapy, which is confession, which is getting those skeletons out of the closet, the more you'll be able to help other people. But you can't do it if you're living a lie. You just can't. And most people are, I shouldn't say most people, many people have not done the work I'm talking about. They just push it under the rug, and it just holds them back. And I'm living proof that doing this work actually will not hinder you from your work, but actually enable you to do the best work of your life and find your purpose.
So if people want to continue to follow you and learn more about how you're serving and what you're offering, where's the best place for them to do that?
Well, I probably am, depending on your audience and who they are, if they're creators and entrepreneurs and that type of people, I train salespeople on how to sell. So you don't need to take any of my programs. It's for people selling other products. But if you genuinely want help, right, in terms of one-on-one coaching, I do have one-on-one packages for entrepreneurs or CEOs that you can look at my website, untapyoursalespotential.com. And I think you set this up /coaching bundles, where
sure
I do
did.
what Brooke set up the page. If you want, support, that's one way to get it, where you can book some time with me. Another way is just to go on my YouTube channel and just watch some of the videos. I have a lot of videos on mindset and procrastination and how to focus and how to plan. LinkedIn is where I'm most active. So if you have a page on LinkedIn, you can connect with me, shoot me a DM. But most importantly, just reach out and tell me how this impacted you. Tell me, if it's made a difference. I don't care if you want to follow me or you get anything from me. What I do care is that you do something about it, right? So if you're struggling in silence and if you're suffering in silence and conflicting with yourself, share with me and maybe I can point you in the right direction of getting help and dealing with it. And the best way to do that is via my LinkedIn site. And then last thing is I have a newsletter. You can send it out. I send out trainings every week. They're sales trainings, but I also do a lot of mindset and habits trainings. It's untapyoursalespotential.com/newsletter. You can sign up there. Brooke set all of this stuff up. So she knows where it all is. Those are the places to reach me: newsletter, YouTube, LinkedIn, or just my coaching services.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ian. You're such a gem.
My pleasure. You are too, and I'm glad we can make this happen.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Art of Lost and Found podcast. I hope that you are feeling inspired and empowered to go forth and explore your curiosity and creativity. As always, if you want any more information about any of our guests or the show notes or anything we discussed on today's episode, you can head over to www.brookeeston.com/podcast. Thank you so much, and looking forward to seeing you in the next episode.